In my lifetime, I have owned 5 Passat W8s, and here's why Volkswagen should have never made it, and why you should never buy one unless you're crazy like me. Back in the early 2000s, Volkswagen put a W8, a 4-liter, 8-cylinder engine into the Volkswagen Passat, the B5.5. This is a terrible car, and I'm here today to tell you about why it should have never been made and why I have owned 5 of them and why I don't think you should buy one. The Volkswagen Passat W8 was released in 2002 and was made until 2004. And I'm sitting here today in front of a W8 from 2004, and this is one of 239 6-speed manual sedans that were brought to North America over that 3-year period. This was one of my dream cars. I was very proud to buy it and restore it up over my last 3 years of ownership, but it is now officially sold and waiting for payment before heading off to its new home with its new owner in Los Angeles. Why did they make this? They were trying to really level up their game and make Volkswagen a more luxurious brand. They had Audi, but this was pre-Audi R8 and pre-Audi becoming a really mainstream luxury brand that competed directly with Mercedes and BMW. And so the whole Volkswagen Audi group was a little confused and decided that they also wanted to make an upscale Volkswagen target set of cars. They had the Phaeton, they had the luxurious Touareg with the insane V10 diesel, and they had this, the W8 Passat. Now, this was a nightmare car for service departments from the very beginning. They only sold about 5,000 total W8s in North America, and from the very beginning, parts availability was impossible. And so the reason today that I have owned 5 of these cars is because 2 of them were parts cars. The first one of these that I owned was actually my first car. And that's the real reason why I am so attached to this engine in the first place. When I was 16, I found a W8 Passat on AutoTrader, listed for sale by Magic Toyota in Edmonds, Washington, about 40 minutes from where I lived. And I showed the listing to my dad. And I said, look, this is an all-wheel drive automatic sedan, which is what checked the boxes for both myself and my parents' criteria for my first car. They were going to help me buy it. And so we had to agree, and that was what we had come up with, was an all-wheel drive automatic sedan, critically, that I fit in. I'm 6'8". There's a lot of cars, especially back in the early 2000s, that I didn't fit in. So we found this '03 Passat about 40 minutes away. I showed the listing to my dad, and he said, a V8? There is no way I am putting my 16-year-old son in a V8. So I gave up on the idea. And instead, we went and looked at a Volvo S60. Unfortunately, I don't fit very well in a Volvo S60, the handbrake being next to the center console, and so I decided that that was not going to be an option. And on the same day, I was able to convince my father to take me to Magic Toyota in Edmonds, where we proceeded to negotiate $4,000 off the purchase price of a 9-year-old used car that had been sitting at the dealership for at least 2 months because nobody wanted to buy it. And so they had it listed for, I think, 13 grand or something like that. And we ended up writing a check that day for $9,000 for a W8. Now, being a 16-year-old guy, I proceeded to beat the hell out of that car. I drove it as hard as I possibly could all the time. I used it for pizza delivery. I commuted my 3-mile commute to school every day in it. And that was my daily. That was my only car. I took it to Portland a couple times, and I once got it up to 145 miles an hour on the Ship Canal Bridge in Seattle. Don't tell anybody I did that. But I love that car. And in about 3 years, I put, I believe, 20,000 miles on it, taking it from just under 70 to just under 90,000 miles. In 3 years, it cost us $30,000 in gas, insurance, maintenance, repairs, and depreciation. $30,000 in 3 years of ownership. We blew up a transmission because the dealership probably didn't refill it with transmission fluid or enough transmission fluid when I got that service done. And it was an absolute nightmare that we ended up selling after 3 years of ownership and 20,000 miles of driving because the check engine light came on. And at the time, I didn't really know what that meant, but I was told by the Volkswagen dealership that it was due to a timing related code. Now, that brings me to a very, very special component on the W8, the timing chains. There are 4 timing chains mounted on the back of the engine in the most complicated arrangement you've ever seen on any engine ever. And here's a picture of it. You get to appreciate that. That was the death nail for that car for me. So we sold it, got $6,000 for it, selling it because thankfully the check engine light was off on the day that we sold it wholesale. And somebody probably did the engine out timing chain service on that car, but it eventually got totaled in 2017 and was never seen again, according to Carfax. I'm sure it's out there somewhere, but nobody seems to know where it is. So that was my story with my first W8. My second W8, I bought in 2023. And I bought it because I was ready to re-experience the nostalgia of my first car. So I bought a green one out of Oregon that was in a field for $2,200. And at the time, I thought that I got a great deal. I came to realize that I could get them for a lot less than that. And I ended up getting this car transported from Oregon with 3 flat tires, missing radiator hoses that were in the trunk, and a seized water pump with something like 180,000 miles on it. And I replaced a bunch of parts. I got a water pump for it, replaced a bunch of parts, and was ready to drive it. Unfortunately, the lady who sold it to me never sent me the title. So I was sitting there with a car with no title, no paperwork to speak of, and no way to put it in my name. So I ended up not being able to drive the damn car. What did I do? I found this one. So later in 2023, around August, I bought this car. It was crashed in the front end. That's why I got a manual, very rare Passat for $4,000. Again, I thought I got a great deal. $4,000. That was a steal. And I got it for that price because it was crashed. And it was the peak of the car market in 2023 when manual wagons were going for like 10 grand with this sort of mileage, 130,000 miles. Sedans, not worth as much. People aren't as excited about them, but still 8,000 bucks or so. So I thought half off for a little bit of front end damage was a great deal. And then I dropped off the green car and the black car to a garage body shop guy in my neighborhood. And he proceeded to take 2 months to swap the front end over and repaint the whole car in black. I had to repossess that car actually at the end of its time at the body shop because the guy stopped responding to me. He was way off on drugs, he was way too busy, and so I had to go repossess my own car with the second key. But it was all painted, it was all done, and I was a happy customer having gotten my car back and having a very well put together manual W8 ready for daily driver use. And I was so excited to have it. So let me tell you what these cars are really about. They're a Passat inside. They're like a little bit luxurious. They have fake wood trim. They have leather seats that like to tear. And they have this buttery smooth W8 engine that sounds really cool. Unfortunately, for the manual transmissions, the gearing makes no sense at all. This thing is geared like a Miata should be. It has a super short first, second, third gear, and so by the time you get to sixth and you're going 80 miles an hour, which you do in California, you're at 3,500 RPM. You're past where it sounds good. You're out of the torque band, and it just isn't a fun car to drive anymore. Furthermore, you got 275 horsepower to the crank, and after the all-wheel drive system, you're really not actually going that fast in this car. Lastly, the automatics were just better built cars and lasted longer. They didn't wear out clutches. They actually were a solid transmission with much better gearing that actually made the car feel better in its acceleration and day-to-day use. So I ended up buying a fourth car that was a wagon, so I had some variety there. I rescued a car that was just on the brink of being scrapped due to a check engine light and rust from Nebraska. I shipped it out here. I bought it for $1,200 and I parked it right next to the sedan. And so now I had this wagon and I had my sedan and I had the automatic and I had the manual and I had all the variety that I needed to be very satisfied with my two-car W8 solution. But over the course of my ownership of those two cars, I amassed an insane repair bill with the manual. I bought it for $4,000. I spent $6,000 on the bodywork and the repaint, and I then proceeded to spend another $30,000 with Driven Auto Care, which is my own business. So I didn't really spend $30,000, but that was what it would have cost retail to repair the car to the extent that I did at Driven Auto Care. I also spent $18,000 on the wagon doing similar repairs at Driven Auto Care. Finally, I had to buy a fifth W8 and I bought it for $500 from Idaho with 230,000 miles on it. I bought that car and shipped it to California so I could have a parts car to park in the backyard. I gave that car away. I sold the wagon on Bring a Trailer for $4,100, so I technically tripled my money if you don't count the repair bills. And on the sedan, I bought it for $4,000. I put real money into that car of at least $8,000, and I sold it for $5,700. So, what did we learn from this? The Passat W8 was a bad selling, slow, expensive. I forgot to mention that. This was a nearly $40,000 car when it was new. A BMW 540i 6-speed was $41,000. What did you get, really? You got a smaller, less luxurious, less well-built car from a lesser brand than a BMW. I've spent a ton of money to relive my nostalgia days. The initial car also was just as expensive to own and is indeed inappropriate for a 16-year-old getting 9 miles to the gallon on the way to school. But at the end of the day, it's a cool sounding engine. It is interesting, and you do get people who are curious about what it is when you pull up and it sounds like a V8 is in the engine bay. But you have so many scary things to worry about with these cars. So as much as I love them, ownership of these cars is a total labor of love that I frankly am done with. I'm throwing in the towel. This one's already sold. The wagon is sold and gone. The parts car I gave away. And I'm W8 free. So you could call me an addict of W8s, but I'd like to think that I won't relapse on this particular drug of choice. With all that said, I hope you've enjoyed this hopefully educational and entertaining story of W8s, and stay driven.